Okay, so we're an art gallery. Why are we relevant? Well, we're a space where we have creative practice as our centre. We show work by creative people, and creativity is a central concern for people in education and across the world, and there is a big challenge around how do we teach for creativity. So we've worked to create a process framework to help to do that. What we've done is take that into schools where we've got a subject that links closely with what we offer in the gallery in terms of visual images creating meaning, and we've applied that process within in a school context.
So the project from Team Solutions' point of view was an opportunity to connect an English classroom with the authentic real world. This seemed like a natural standard for us to look at as well. The achievement standard around creating a visual text is new at levels 2 and 3, and lots of teachers are really uncomfortable with it. So we wanted to go back to level 1 and look at the possibilities of the standard at its foundation.
According to the level 1 achievement criteria, it has to have a developed idea. There are no limitations as to what ideas it can be. We just prefer to attach it to a text that we're teaching. We find that it's easier for us. We do not have to spend longer on figuring out the idea. So it's just a transition from the text into another standard. We focus a lot on the ideas that the aesthetic image is able to convey. It needs to be convincing. It needs to command attention.
What is a good visual text? Is it something that looks really slick? Is it something, is a good visual text something that communicates to everybody its ideas? How we message those things, what we're open to, what's possible within the kind of context we're working with.
Beyond school, lots of people understand that students need to be creative thinkers, and that they can't just keep regurgitating what's already existed. They need to be creative culture makers.
Creativity is essential in education, because why do we get educated? We don't get educated just to go through the system, we get educated to make a difference in our world. We have to encourage that in order to stay alive, to keep evolving and to become what is possible. Thinking is a process. It is something that isn't just, and when we think about creative thinking, it's not just from nothing to the genius idea. Just like our lives are a process, creativity is a process, and it's macro, micro on every level. So we have this creative thinking process where we have explore, experiment and refine. And then we've got the critical thinking framework where we've got describe, interpret and evaluate. So again, that idea that you don't just jump to a conclusion about what something means, but you actually have many processes in which you go through in order to develop complex thinking. One of the important parts of the framework though is not just those thinking processes, but is about the attitudes and values that you bring to those. So you will never fully realise your potential as either a creative or critical thinker unless you actually activate these attitudes and values. Those values include curiosity, being curious about your world, being cooperative, being able to work with other people, reflectiveness, being reflective in your thinking, empathy, so being empathetic not just to other people but also to yourself in your learning, being able to take risks, so take big risks in what you do in your learning as well, being resilient in the face of failure. So openness is really important, and it's openness to different ways of working, to other people's ideas and to different possible solutions. So exploring is the idea of exploring openly all sorts of possibilities. So how have other people done things? You might look at many examples of how an artist has, or different artists have made work. Or creative writing, the same thing, explore many options or examples of that. Or actually mix that up and look at examples of creative writing and art, or whatever context you're bringing that to. Well, what we hoped would come out of that was the opportunity for young people to experience rich texts in a gallery context, so the artworks, these rich texts that have so much potential for them to make meaning from and for them to learn from.
When I think back to that art gallery visit, I just see excitement, how excited the students were and how actively they were all engaged in their conversations, and they were just in charge of their own learning.
I did Nightmare, and I booked this one because it's scary, and the proportion of the size of the creatures and the layout, how they're where they're placed.
Oh, I get it, because this bird is like what's called, it's like a seabird, and then the swimsuit, and then it connects to the sea.
Hearing kids talking about coming to the art gallery and how seeing other people's work, and we thought about what kind of work might connect with them, but I had several kids talk about that seeing people talk about things that really mattered to them, not just because they had to do something, but because it really was about who they were, was really fundamental to them taking that risk. That was really exciting.
I think so often students don't get to do any learning in English outside of the four walls of an English classroom, so that is a first sort of starter of actually seeing somewhere that they could go that's relevant to them in English. Connecting all of the arts together, hugely important as well, because writing doesn't stand alone from music, which doesn't stand alone from art, from dance, all those creative things coming together. It was really exciting. Just seeing the students' excitement about being in the city was really cool as well, and the place that is the art gallery. And then what I really loved was the people who were visiting the gallery who weren't students, seeing the students learning in action, and the students realising that they were learning, because often they think that learning only happens at school, but it happens everywhere. So that to me is the huge value that the gallery has for us as a space in Auckland, that we've got this amazing resource that students can learn in and through, and I think that's really exciting.
Open your mind on stuff, like not staying with the basic stuff, like for example, emotional. You would just use, people would think emotional is just like, it's just, oh yeah, it's your emotions. But there's lots of ways you can just show that one word.
We got given questions, stuff like, how do I feel about who I am? One word to describe me, and what is one experience that has had the most impact on me? Things that will help you, like questions that would help us figure out what we want to draw and what we want to make.
There was just this one thing that my teacher brought up was about a leaf. Yeah, she like got a leaf and then she was like, what does this look like? And then we were just like, a leaf? And she's like, yeah, but what does it really look like? And then we're like, a leaf? And then she's like, look closely. So we looked closely. She's like, what does it look like? And then we're just like, a leaf. And she's like, what's inside that leaf? Like color, texture? She's like, yes. And then anything else? Like, nah. She's like, pattern. You get me?
So the experimental phase is probably the most challenging phase. It's the one where you're really putting yourself into it, and that is the phase in which you're really going to have to pull on those attitudes and values, because you are trying new things. So when you are experimenting and putting things together in new ways, you're going to have to be open to new ways of working. You're going to have to be resilient when things don't work. You're going to have to take risks and put yourself out there, and you're going to have to give yourself some empathy when it doesn't work, for example. So very much I would say within the 3 phases, that's definitely the one where you're going to need to pull on those, and teaching for those is a really important thing to do.
The students were very comfortable, quite relaxed and casual at times. At times I thought that maybe they are mucking around, but then towards the end, when students were given time to share their ideas, rationalize the visuals that they created to represent the ideas, I was pleasantly surprised.
Oh, we've been exploring like different ideas and experimenting with materials and the visual techniques, just learning about those and how to like use different materials to make an idea, like create the idea and stuff like that. I didn't start with drawing first. I just started with going through pictures and magazines and that, and just cutting them out, ripping them out, just sticking them together. And then I wanted to use the watercolors because I haven't used it before. I want to see if it'll work out.
Playing around with the materials too. I used to just grab stuff and then chuck them all together, and that was like one identity, and I was like, oh, I should just do another one. So it was just me playing around with materials and stuff like that, and it got me to this place too.
So I think for me, it's given me some strategies that I can talk to teachers about what you can do when people have kind of feel like when the students feel like they've reached a point where they can't go any further. They've now got some strategies for going forward, and those attitudes and values, that risk taking. Are you at the point where you need to be open to some new ideas, that you need to take some feedback from your peers? Those sorts of things are words now that teachers can actually enact and bring to life, so that they've actually got something that they can use to change what they're doing.
You'll choose your best 3 from here. You will describe the image that you can have. Okay, at this stage, you'll just write in your ideas down. You do not need to sketch.
It seemed to me that the students were taking longer than I expected them to, and they seemed to struggle to represent their ideas visually.
What is your definition of cool? And then, what are the images that would represent that? Like if you had to represent it visually, what would cool look like? Okay. So what would trapped be like? What does trapped mean in your context?
It seemed that everyone was engaged, and as a result of that, I was able to move on to the different groups and have conferences about the ideas and the techniques that they can use. I found that in order to help them develop their ideas or give it more form, if they combine 2 or more ideas, then they're able to flesh out the initial idea more. It's just giving them more time, because in terms of my approach, the techniques that I've used in class, it's nothing new. It's the same, but I think students need more time to let their ideas simmer and just experiment with different techniques or different sketches that they can continue building on.
I don't know what I was doing. I just saw a bunch of pictures I liked and cut it out and ripped it out and then just sticked it on the paper. And the background is the watercolours. I just wanted to test it out.
So it wasn't just experimenting with materials, moving things around and all. It was also thinking throughout the process, so that reflection, engagement with those materials helped them enrich their ideas even more.
Sabina talks about what used to be the drafting phase is now the experimenting phase, and I think that was the bit that we never really understood, those processes and strategies playing out in a clear way for students. So what often used to be the blank page and students saying, I'm thinking, and the teacher thinking, but it doesn't look like you're thinking, it looks like you've got a blank page, has become some experimenting with different tools to help them to make that blank page more than just thinking in their head. It can actually play out in real life, and then they can refine those ideas.
But in this particular context, it wasn't drafting, it was working with different things. It was working with a particular idea, working with a particular colour, a particular material. It looked chaotic. I wasn't prepared for that, but upon reflection and also when the students were given an opportunity to feedback why they created what they did and what was the thinking that was behind it, every single student could justify what their creation.
Refine. So refine is the last phase, and it is the phase that it's not just colouring in until you're finished. It's very much kind of almost taking that experimental phase and starting to really refine it down to something that you say, yes, this is my final product. So as you're working, you've locked in on particular things that you want to keep. They might be ideas, it might be processes or ways of working, and what you're doing is coming back to your experiments and back to your exploration phase, and you're saying, right, what worked the best at doing this? And you're starting to really just refine it down to you say, right, this is the thing I actually want to produce.
With this task, a lot of students are personalizing their interpretation of identity, and they are willing to go to that level and share their personal experience through the static image. Says a lot about the process, how it's enriched the students, how they're willing to take a risk.
Draw this part where I'm from, and this part is Auckland because I got no family here, and my family's there, so I'm going to draw there all bright.
In the end, it was quite surprising that the students chose to do their own identity. I think that in itself says a lot, how they were brave enough to take that risk, and they are still working. They haven't given up. Like, they're still working through that, although it is very challenging. I'd have to say, like, I would struggle I think, but they have been going on.
I just keep jumping from one thing to another, and I just wasted a lot of time doing that.
Do you feel that it was a waste of time?
I kind of do and I kind of don't, because if I hadn't have done that, then I wouldn't have had the things I wanted to draw.
There's a girl here. She's having an emotional breakdown and she looks like she's trapped almost, with the chains symbolizing her emotional prison.
In my static image, I've jotted down like trees that showed me as like, that symbolizes me as trapped. And then in the middle here was supposed to be me trapped. It's just me, a shadow. And then the moon is the light, and it kind of shows me that one way. And I'll probably put more effective stuff inside to make it more trapped.
I think I'm more interested now in the thinking process that goes behind it, that deeper level of thinking, how it supports them develop those ideas and then convey those through their visual techniques.
It was a lot harder and more challenging, but a lot easier at the same time because we went more into depth, and I liked how we got a lot of chances to experiment, like with not just paper. We had a lot of materials we got to use. We got to decide it, like what we wanted to use.
I appreciate that more, and I know now how that adds value to this process, to this assessment task.
So the project was really exciting and really scary, but really exciting. And I think that's what it was going to be, because I think we authentically engaged with this process.
It's challenged my perception of what learning looks like. It was really difficult because like organisation, it was quite difficult, but because of that, now I'm really open to what learning could look like.
You know, one of the outcomes was realising what experimenting was and how hard that was and how wonderful and exciting it was, but just how challenging it really was to really engage and really draw from your own ideas and try many things. And we realised how important those attitudes and values were, that you really needed to draw on those, and you really need to be able to teach for those things. You needed to be able to go into that classroom and really spend time not just saying what are you producing in terms of your project, but actually just having kind of conversations with people about what does this thing mean? What does it mean to be empathetic? Why are we going to need to do this thing? How do we do this thing? What will our classroom look like? Where do you do this in your own life and do this successfully?
It's just an opportunity for students to be more aware of the way they learn, and also they're able to enjoy those successes that, yes, I was able to do this. So yes, that's a success for me there, instead of waiting for 5 weeks for an achieved grade, for example. But I think it's a really easy way to embed it within your everyday classroom practice.
We changed the framework having done this project. It was Explore, Experiment, Create, and we changed it to Explore, Experiment, Refine. And we changed it to that because we realised we were putting all this emphasis on this idea of create and the scariness of what create is, when actually the creative process is all these things. So you're doing this at any stage. It was taking that kind of energy out of that and the kind of fear out of that, because what we realised was you're in this the whole time.
Just taking out the framework from out of the static image and seeing how versatile it is to adapt to the other standards, I just find it so easy. So those structure is already there. So thinking about any standard and just slotting, just having that framework, so exploring, experimenting, refining, and then sharing, so the publishing, and then working according to that framework and slotting in any standard and under those subheadings. I find it so easy doing unit planning with that. It's really practical. It's been working really well with me, and to be honest, I wasn't prepared for such big shifts in my mindset. I was prepared for improved student learning outcomes, but I wasn't prepared for the shift in mindset that I enjoyed.
She has really embraced a student-centred classroom environment with the standard, which she talks about having that throughout her year now, so it's really changed her as a teacher, and that's what we might hope for other teachers from now on as well. I think also we were really hoping to exemplify how you can connect with your wider community, which was both the art gallery and actually the families as well. So the celebration was a really important part of the project in my mind. It meant that the parents came into the school in a really authentic and genuine way.
I feel like what we saw from the work was you did start to see kids authentically creating work that felt authentic to them, that talked about stuff that was important to them, that spoke with a voice that was their voice. And to me, that is creative work. How do you actually mark creativity? And you know, what assessment criteria do you put around that? And I think that's a challenge that we just need to put out there and say this is something that needs some thinking about.
In terms of just looking at the achievement, this time we enjoyed a higher percentage of merits and excellences than just achieved. That was a huge accomplishment. Like, even though that's not what I was pushing for from the start, the focus shifted away from just the final outcome during the process. It was that students' connection with what they were creating. It was a personal connection. It was theirs. It was their ideas being validated. So they gave it their 100%. And it was all unique to that individual student. By validating the students' feelings, by validating the students' values, what they regard as important, there's this boost in their confidence and they become these stronger individuals.
I've done quite a bit of work with teachers now, sharing the framework and the excitement from teachers of going, oh, finally I've got something that makes sense to me. So I think we've seen some really cool stuff happening at this particular school. Hopefully it's going to grow beyond that, and building a relationship with one of our community partners has been really exciting as well. I think English teachers now know about the art gallery and the possibilities, which is a really cool thing.
Participating in this project challenged my comfort zone, challenged my thinking, challenged my normal ways of doing things. So it was uncomfortable at that stage because I wasn't prepared for what it would look like. I wasn't prepared for the change in my thinking, the change in my perspective. So that bit was uncomfortable, but it was worth it. So I'd say that if you're in the comfort zone, that's actually a risk. That means we're not evolving. So get out, challenge the comfort zone, get out of it. And that when taking those risks, that's when we're able to increase our learning.